I'd like to call this special meeting of the Board of Education to order. It's Wednesday, October 26th. It's about 20 minutes to 8. We're at Nashville High School North, and Mr. Kaufman will call the roll.
Ms. Van Twyver?
Here.
Mr. Mosier?
Here.
Mr. Farrington?
Here.
Mrs. Oden? Mrs. Hohensee?
Yeah,
Here.
Mrs. Oden
Did she leave the
left.
room? She was coming
She
back?
left. She does not participate in union. She feels she has a conflict of interest.
Okay.
Therefore, she
Thank you.
abstains.
Mrs. Hohensee, Dr. Moritaki?
Here.
Mr. Kaufman is here. Mr. Hollowell?
Here.
Mrs. Ziem?
Here.
Also here, attending Dr. Brown and Mr. Frederickson.
We have a quorum. Can I get a motion on the floor to ratify the tentative agreement with the Nashville Teachers Union? Mr. Hollowell?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay. Did you want to speak to your motion, Mr. Hollowell? No?
No, I'm curious someday to learn the details as to why it took so long to get language set aside, but save that for another night.
Thank you. I appreciate that, actually. There were a couple of changes that, Mr. Kaufman, that have happened since the documents went out. Would you like to share that, Mr. Kaufman?
Right, when I went over the document this afternoon, I found two things. The first one is on page 10. What is a new section A, 5.5, new section A. It's in red italics. It says to retirees at the full cost of the premium. I spoke with Mr. Clausen about this. This is language from the previous contract that was corrected in a sidebar or an amendment that has since been added as a correction. It was not done as part of our negotiation, but it should rightly be here. I just wanted to point out that that's a change from what we had previously seen.
Mr. Hollowell?
So I want to understand this process because this is a tad unusual what we're doing here. Typically, we vote for the contract, minor changes end up being made, and we don't revote. So we're revoting. Is the union also revoting?
They did. We got an email from Mr. Marcoux yesterday saying, and you heard him last night at the meeting, saying that that they were satisfied.
Has this?
Basically, some of the language was not, it had been agreed upon verbally, but it had not been changed in the documents. So we went back and changed it. Then it became a process of backwards and forwards. There were actually, because we concentrated, I would suggest, more on the money than we did on the language. Then after the monies had been agreed upon, when we started looking at the language, it needed some changing. And Mr. Clausen actually went back and forth, and we finally resolved it. And as far as I know, it is agreed upon. Did you have another question?
Follow up, which is, did the union vote on the changes that Mr. Kaufman is suggesting need to be made? I mean, this is the document that the union voted on yesterday, right?
I don't know when they voted on it, but I would presume so.
Well, the one thing that he just mentioned.
Sorry, you would presume what?
That they did vote on the change. I hadn't seen this change before. I saw it when I performed a review this afternoon, and I inquired about it. I spoke with Mr. Clausen, and I gave you the explanation he gave to me.
It was in the contract. He's telling you that it was in the contract. He didn't pick up on it, but they did. They saw that it was in the contract. So they voted on the contract with that.
It's not a change to the document that we were provided.
There were two changes that he's discussing. One goes to what I'm saying. Another one, there was a mistake, as I recall.
There's another error I need to point out.
There's another one that he wants to bring up after we get through this one. Ms. Van Twyver.
Let me see if I understand this correctly now. This statement, the board shall become directly responsible for negotiation, that paragraph was exactly the same as it was in the previous contract. Is that right?
You're asking me?
It was my
Whoever
understanding.
was negotiating, I'd
I'll
like
be
to know.
happy.
Go ahead.
Well, as you can see, there are corrections. There's text that's struck, so there's
Was that-
obviously text that's been struck out of that paragraph, so
Since
The
previous-
text that I just highlighted, to retirees at the full cost of the premium, I was, what Mr. Clausen said to me, this text was, to the best of my knowledge, not in a previous version. I don't know how far back it goes.
It was in the previous version. It was not in the, it was not in, what they basically were saying was, this was language that they had been agreed upon, and it had not, we didn't get it put into this new review. And so when they went back and looked at it, they realized it had been left out, but it had already been discussed and agreed upon previously, and so they stuck it back in. Is that correct, Mrs.
During
O'Gara?
negotiations this year, they agreed upon those words. And you just didn't get that edit into the copy that we got the last time. Is that right?
In the last contract, did not read like this. And the superintendent at the time sought clarification from the union because what you are looking at here is correct. We do not pay dental insurance for retirees. They pay the full cost of the premium, and the previous contract did not send that. I believe the contract that the board ratified the first time says this very same thing as here.
Okay.
That's my recollection, because I remember putting it in, and there was a whole conversation about it. So I'm 98% sure that this was in the first ratification. But what's here is correct. We do not pay, retirees have to pay the full cost of the dental. We only pay the full cost for the active teachers.
So I don't understand why that this is a change. If it was in the last one.
It's not a change, it was an oversight, is basically what it was. And so now, when they realized it was oversight, they put it back in, but because they put it back in, Doris and Mr. Kaufman had not seen it. Because it goes back, as Mrs. O'Gara is pointing out, it goes back to the previous contract. Mrs. Hohensee, did you want to say something?
Thank you. I just wanted to point out the reason that Mr. Hollowell was asking, why did it take so long? Why are we voting on it a second time? There have been a substantial number of changes since the last time we voted. When we voted, the chart was correct. The language was not fully complete because there wasn't an agreement between our side and their side. One of the big things was nurse equalization. It was a term. There were a few descriptive adjectives and descriptions on what that meant, but it wasn't delineated to which sections, 5.4, 5.5, for example, or whatever sections it would go to. So the specific language of nurse equalization was rather big in terms of rectifying it later. There were a number of other little things that had to, we changed about 30 different articles or more. There were a number of substantive changes, and then part of the problem was towards the end, the board wasn't allowed in on these clarifications. It was
Go into, sorry, go ahead.
it was an administrative function, we were told, so that, again, there was another layer of delay.
One of the things that we were just, it just took, basically it's because of what I said. Basically we spent, the real concern was about money because we didn't have any money. So once we resolved the money, then we realized that we hadn't looked closely enough at the language to make sure that it was clear and that there were no unintended consequences. It is my understanding that those have been resolved now. If you're satisfied with the first one, he does have another one that needs to be put on the table so that you'll be aware of it.
Thank you. Page,
Well, are you satisfied over here?
If the union has seen it and agrees, fine.
They have. Thank you.
page 36. One of the things that,
Hang on.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
One of the things Ms. Hohensee just alluded to was nurse equalization, and part of that process was that all nurses would be equivalent in salary to the bachelor's degree. So if you look at the first column that says 1-BA, and if you look at the far right column where it says all nurses all of the, whatever is in the BA column, equalization, should be in the all nurses column. So if you go down this list, you'll see that step 11 in the nurses column does not match the BA column, and that's the correction I want to bring forward to you so you know about it. It should read 60,694.
Mr.
That-
Hollowell, Mr. Hollowell,
So that change was that communicated to the union?
Yes, I know that I had brought that change forward previously. I think it was when they made the edits on the page, it was missed. But this had been, as far as I know, it has been.
was an oversight.
It's
What did
over
Mr.
600.
Clausen say
600.
today? Did you speak to Mr. Clausen as well, Mrs. O'Gara?
I had the right amount on my chart.
Okay.
So this is just an oversight.
It's just an editorial change, really.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, no. It's a
Yes, it's a significant-
$650
yeah, it's
change
significant.
in the, but it, I mean, the union's not going to complain because we're
To their
adding.
favor.
We're looking out for them, yes, we are.
Well,
Okay.
they probably don't view it that way, but
Well,
Well, I
there's a
would-
nurse at step 11 who will appreciate that I saw it.
I would, and I would just like to say that, going to Mr. Marcoux's remarks last night, obviously, we could not give our teachers what other unions in the city have been given. It is not because this board didn't want to give them, it's because we don't have it to give them. And so I just want to be sure that they understand that this was not in any way a reflection on our esteem for the job they do or for the gifts they bring to our children. It's just unfortunate. It's something that this board's learned to live with, unfortunately. Did you want to say something? Anybody else have anything they would like to add before we vote on this? Speak now, forever hold your peace.
roll call.
Roll call.
Hold on, 1 second. They gave me extra sheets. Trying to use them.
And thank you to the union for resolving this so that we can go on, so that our kids can have the best year possible.
Ms. Van Twyver,
Yes,
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mr. Farrington?
Yes.
Mrs. Oden's not here. Mrs. Hohensee?
Yes?
Dr. Moritaki?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman, yes. Mr. Hollowell?
Yes?
And Mrs. Ziem?
Yes,
Okay.
it is unanimous. Do I have a motion? Mr. Hollowell?
I'm handing out to the board, I'm sorry Mrs. Oden left, I didn't realize, I forgot she would leave. I had been asked to draft a letter.
Oh, yes.
I've done that, I've given you a copy of what I wrote. I did two things. Number one, instead of, the superintendent had provided a number for so there was the 1.1 million, give or take, that was required that we increase, and then there was a 1.7 million number that took into consideration a step increase for teachers and things like that. What I ended up, and this is just a draft, people can tell me they don't want it. I basically said, well, let's assume the cap will be similar to this year, it'd be a 1.3% increase. And so basically saying, even if you figure a nominal increase that you would expect would be the same as the spending cap, that's 1.3%, which is a little under $1 million, so that total amount is now a little bit less, but regardless, the items that are listed are similar. I tried to address some of the issues that Mrs. Ziem had talked about, that in each item, I tried to identify either a baseline that we're already at, that we were changing, or potentially some issues with making that item happen. I guess the other item is under the elementary school. I left it generic, just indicated that If you look at the smallest of our schools, it's between 3.2 and 3.5 million dollars and roughly 300 to 325 students, and the issues that would be involved in trying to redistribute those students.
So can we take these home and get back to you if anybody has any concerns? I think it would be nice to give everybody an opportunity to absorb.
I agree.
So how quick,
Fine, I mean, I think we should communicate to the mayor that we have a draft that we're working on. I know there was a deadline given, he's not having his meeting until the 10th. I'm not really sure whether it's that critical that our letter shows up to him on
what was
Friday,
the deadline,
which is-
Dr. Brown, that you had?
The 28th.
The 28th, and that's
Friday.
Friday. So today is Wednesday, so if everybody, tomorrow night, can everybody get back by tomorrow night? So on Friday, Dr. Brown can,
Question.
yes.
Are we going to include Dr. Brown's two-page summary too, along with this letter, or does this replace her letter?
I was thinking this replaced her letter since it would be redundant.
I thought hers was clear in the way it broke it out. And also, I don't know if the board feels as I do, but I just thought we'd thank the mayor at some point for putting this out and being transparent this early in the process. I just want the board not to be antagonistic. It's a difficult year, and I just wanted to try to get along.
I would agree with that, Mrs. Hohensee. Actually, I have great respect for the fact that he did, and he did mention that it's coming early, and so to that extent, he has somewhat touched on it, but it would be nice if we had, what I would suggest is maybe we email our whatever comments we have, okay? And see where it goes, okay? Because I don't think you can, I don't feel like I can sit here and read this letter while we're on television and come up with any intelligent solutions. Dr. Mortaki.
I looked over the letter, and at first blush, I think it's a very good effort, and I thank Mr. Hallowell for doing what he did. And I'll try to get back with you, to you via email with, more detailed comments.
Thank you. Dr. Hollowell?
So thank you.
Can I promote you? I will if I can.
Who are these suggestions going to be emailed to?
I would think maybe the whole board. Can we do that legally?
I don't know how you can get that done in a day and a half.
Do we want to meet tomorrow night quickly? Well, so what is the will of the board?
I'm happy with it like it is,
Well,
unless there's no,
I'd like to see a show of hands of how many people would like to go home and read it. You outvoted, Mr. Farrington.
thank you.
Well, I mean,
No, I can count, I can get it, yeah.
Well,
I'm
and I
just,
wasn't
I was
trying-
just expressing my view. I said I'm happy with it the way it is.
no,
so-
and that's why I did it, because
no, I understand.
I want consensus to rule. It shouldn't be just me. I'm only one person. Mr. Hollowell.
So I'm fine. My suggestion would be that if the board wants to have more time to review it, that perhaps we could have Superintendent Brown contact the mayor's office and ask them how critical it is that they get the letter there on Friday. I suspect we will hear that it is not that critical that they get our letter by Friday. And I don't know when our next board meeting?
Monday?
November
Do we have one
1st,
Monday, or
2nd.
is that Hollow the 2nd?
Oh,
Well,
did we move the October, weren't we supposed to meet October
We asked to
31st?
move
Yeah,
it.
I did, but I never heard anybody say anybody moved anything, so
November
it'd be nice
2nd.
to communicate that.
So then we're going to contact the mayor's office tomorrow and see if it comes on Monday or Tuesday, if that's acceptable. If it's not, then we'll,
With all due respect, President Ziem, I think that request needs to come from you. The letter from the mayor was addressed to the two of us, and so I think it would be appropriate as a president of the board for you to make that contact and let his office know that the response will be coming no later than November 2nd.
No, I don't, and I don't, thank you, and I don't have any problem with that. I will absolutely call tomorrow, and I personally find them very easy to work with. Mr. Hollowell?
So I guess I would suggest that, I mean, if we're gonna wordsmith this, we can't really wordsmith this over email, so I'm not really sure. My suggestion would be that individual members send their suggestions to Mrs. Ziem, but only to Mrs. Ziem, otherwise we're having a board meeting outside a board meeting.
Okay.
And that we set aside some time at our meeting to go over those changes. I would,
Monday night, you mean, or Tuesday night?
whenever that meeting, I
Yes,
think it's
Tuesday night.
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
I don't think we should overthink it. I mean, is what it is. It's really not that, I don't think it's that different than what the superintendent put together. I just tried to put some language around it to make it clear. I will be honest that I made the decision at 1:45 a.m. as I was doing this draft, since I really started this last night, that's when we talked about it, to not put in flowery language to the mayor. I don't think it's really all that different than the language that we've gotten from previous mayors. It is what it is. I don't think I want to thank him for asking us to come up with a level-funded budget. But that's my opinion, so.
I don't think we're thanking him for asking us to come up with a level-funded budget. What we're thanking him for is making this a community discussion. Because in the community discussion, then if I am convinced that if the citizens of Nashville realize what's happening to our educational process, that we will have more power because they will speak up, and there is the more support you have for a cause, the more power. This is a political world we live in, and that's the way politics work. So I think that a community conversation is always in the best interest. And unlike what you're saying, I don't think that we had too many community conversations with any mayor I've served under. But I will give you that's up to interpretation, and we all view things differently. So that's good. Let's then, I will call the mayor's office tomorrow. I will see if we can get an extension. And so I'm hearing two different dates, though. I thought that someone said Wednesday and another person said Tuesday. Is the first meeting Tuesday?
Wednesday.
Right, it's
The
Wednesday.
full board, though. You can't have it at the policy.
Policy is the first,
Oh.
which is Tuesday, and then Wednesday is the full board, which is the 3rd.
Okay.
Sorry, it's the 2nd. You have, the whole week next week has meetings attached to it, except for
Oh,
Monday, which is
goody.
Halloween.
We could have a special meeting after the policy meeting.
Yes, we could. Why don't we do this? Why don't I will, in talking to the mayor's office, I'll determine if they really have how fast they want it, and we'll make our decision based on that. But I don't have a problem with doing it after policy, but a lot of people are not coming to policy, so they may. So I'll take a consensus at that point to see when they want to have it, and we'll go with the majority. That makes sense? Mr. Farrington?
I'd like to thank Mr. Hollowell for sitting up until 2 o'clock this morning working on this.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Really nice job combining it.
And it goes, Mr. Hollowell is very generous with his time and with his efforts on behalf of this board, so I would be the first one to,
You'll have to be second. I was first.
yes, I don't mind being second.
Okay.
I'll take any place in line I can get. Is there any other business to come before this board? Seeing none, is...
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Good night.